I didn't want to take so long from my last video to put this up, but school has been kicking me up the butt, and work just decided to start kicking me up the butt too because we got extra hours allotted to our store. So now I'm working instead of 3 hours a month, like 6 hours a week. That puts a damper on your free time, and unfortunately, this is one of the things that went down. So, to make sure that I make the most efficient use of my time, I have brought the list of topics. These aren't all the topics I could talk about, but they are ones that I have wanted to talk about and can put in as needed. What we're looking at right now is not one of the topics. It's simply a desktop image for Mouse Guard, which is a sort of like a comic book graphic novel thing with these cool little mice, and it's awesome. And they also made a role-playing game, which I have, but I haven't read it too much. A very simplistic kind of role-playing mechanic. Let's forget about that and get to the topics. In the comments, feel free to vote for whichever topic you like or want to hear about, and you can vote for more than one and put them in order of preference. Simply that way I can tally up what's been shown and then make sure I prioritize the next time I have free time and can do a video, I talk about that. I'll actually put, I guess, the list in screen in a moment, but I'll read off of them in order. This is in no particular order, it's just I started listing stuff. So, the first thing on the list are the Fangs of the Worm, which is sort of like a super group of villains. It was incredibly inspired by Record of Lodoss War and the fact where they got all of those bad guys together to make a party. And I'm like, I want a party like that, so I made one. Each of the people within the Fangs of the Worm has their own entry as well. So there's a Fangs of the Worm sort of broad scale, which also includes, if you remember Akanai Jean or Ashardalon, the demon dragon of dusk from the other video, that's the guy that these guys are working for. They are his fangs. And they include Dmitri von Reinstadt, who is the Dragon King, who is Akane Jean's son. Wrath, a dwarven cleric of Erithnol, following the basic 3E, who was the god of chaos and slaughter. Wrath runs the Sons of Wrath cult, a group of just wanton serial murderers and barbarians. Groder, a name stolen straight out of Record of Lodoss War, but instead of being applied to the wizard, it's actually been applied to Gebera, who was the cleric in Record of Lodoss War. He's a necromancer. He is basically the sort of earthly scion of Nerul, who was the Greyhawk god of death and murder and evilness. And he's a straight up necromancer. He's got his own undead servants who follow him because of his divine patronage. And then the fourth member of the Fangs of the Worm that has been statted out and everything is Marhalt Elsdragon, a name that I got from my best friend Chuck, which I later found out was stolen from a magic card. But Marhalt Elsdragon is the king of lies. He is a bard who is incredibly manipulative of people, and his main purpose is everybody else in the world thinks Marhalt is a really awesome guy, whereas the player characters are the only people who know that he is bad. And he has his own little group too, but they're not evil. Next up are the Faces of Fear. This is probably, for two of them, I could do their own video, and then the group as a whole. The Faces of Fear is a cult of sort of assassins and fear-mongers that I made up a while back. And their main claim to fame, I made up a prestige class for a contest about Halloween. And my inspiration for that prestige class was the guy from Men in Black, the first movie, the bug who's wearing a guy's skin and it's all hanging off of him all loose and nastiness. And also, anytime you have those kids during Halloween that wear the rubber masks, where, of course, the mask doesn't fit, and so it's like hanging off of their head, kind of, and you can see through the eye holes that there's stuff beneath it, gross like that. So the Faces of Fear, as a cult, what they do is they cut the skin uh, off of their face. They basically go underneath and detach their skin from their head, and their skin just kind of hangs there, and then they pull it open and everything, and it's very scary. Their leader is a woman known as Saren Culmer. They call the Mistress, and she's a total whack job. Their enforcer, as it were, is Garrett, who's a swordsman, and he has his own little. He's got two different sidekicks, and he has a whole huge magic sword collection. And then the third member of that cult is Warwick, and he's an elven wizard, and he doesn't have that much going for him, so he wouldn't get his own video. What's next? The Acquisitioners Consortium and the Black Scorpions, two thieves guilds that operate in the city of, well, Free City Valor is where they operate, and that is in the same vicinity as Trocare. So that wouldn't be something that you would use. You could like pull them out of that place and put them somewhere else for the world. But basically, the Acquisitioners Consortium are people you pay to steal something you need, and then the Black Scorpions are an assassin group. The history of Ro. Ro is the ultimate god of lawful goodness in the Trocarian mythology. And there's a bunch of stuff going around him. He invented paladins. In one version of Trocare, it's actually a monotheistic world. Ro is the actual only true god in the world, and all the other gods, and air quotes gods in that world, are kind of like analogous to angels masquerading as gods. They're pretending to be gods. They wish they were gods. And so there's a bunch of stuff that I've made up for Ro. The next one is Horde. Horde is the god of nobility. And in another version of Trocare, there's like three main gods. Ro's the god of good, Horde is basically the god of evil, and then there's another goddess, her name is Deirdre, and she's sort of neutral in between. Now the thing about Horde is he actually is dead and came back to life. And he ties in with the next topic, which is the Black Duchy. A while back I was doing a freeform roleplay, and you had to make up your own country. And there were a couple rules like that would determine what kind of things you were good at and what have you. And so I made up this country called the Black Duchy, and it was ruled by the Black Duke. And I made the Black Duke one of my characters, from one of my characters. I had a character named Mikhail Blackshaft, and he became the Black Duke. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in there. Next, there's two necromancers who lived in the runes of Trocare, the original idea for the runes. One was a cleric named Jonzer Quint, and another one was a wizard named Damon Realis. They both specialized in necromancy magic, and they were both in Trocare specifically to investigate the undead presence. And Jonzer's wife and Damon's nephew are having an affair. Cervante Ordóñez is one of the first, I should say the first long-term 3rd edition fighter I ever played. So he had a lot of in-game development, and he now has a bunch of after-game development as well. I made up a whole prestige class to go along with him, because he was a 2-weapon fighter, and he fought with 2 long swords, as opposed to what people normally use in 3rd edition, which is like 2 short swords or a long sword and a short sword. And there was the Knight of Capuchin magic card shows a guy in full plate mail wielding 2 long swords, and that became Cervantes' image. That is what he eventually became. Qasim Rashad, who is basically Cervantes Ordóñez in 2nd edition D&D. I made him up for a birthright campaign where the player characters are nobles, and they are literally descended from gods. Through, like a bunch of... I shouldn't say they're descended from gods in a natural way. The gods at the top of a mountain once died, and their bloodline, their power, passed into the people who were there. And the player characters are now several generations down the line the heirs of the people who were at the mountain when the gods died and their power entered into them. He is sort of like the prototypical paladin kind of guy. That's one of the first paladin characters I made and played, and really made me fall in love with the class. Next up is Abdur al-Rahman, a uh, Arab character. I don't know if Arab's the right word, but definitely like a more Middle Eastern type character, just you can tell from the name. And he is the character I made up for another prestige class I created, and those were the Cliff Raiders of Abamal Ali. And they fight by jumping off of the top of cliffs and spearing people. So they basically jump off the top of a cliff holding a spear down at you and land on you. They're pretty fun. I would mostly be talking about the Cliff Raiders more so than Abdur al Rahman because I never got to actually play him in a game. The next topic, Challenge of Champions. This is going along with the topic I think I had mentioned before. I've mentioned several times. The difference between challenging a character and challenging a player. Players solve puzzles, whereas the characters basically win fights. The Challenge of Champions is a second edition set of adventures that came out that were specifically meant to challenge players. It's a bunch of problem solving challenges that they have to overcome. And the game even comes with you can actually test your players. You time them as they go through the competition, and if they beat a certain time, then they won the competition in the game world. They beat the other teams. It's pretty fun. Next up is the Asp's Den. The Asp was a character I made up for Tallest fan website, and he was a guy who specialized in poison. And as a sort of web enhancement for the article I wrote about the Asp, I was going to create his den, which is a dungeon, basically his headquarters. And I made up a bunch of stuff for it, but I never actually formally sat down and wrote it out. And then, of course, the fan website kind of died, so that's never seen the light of day. Next topic is the abandoned or dead dungeons. Going over in the sandbox game, the importance of having dungeons that have already been cleared out or that used to have people there and then they all just died and so there's no one there anymore. It's a dungeon to explore, but there's not much by way of challenges or even sometimes treasure. So you might have to deal with a couple traps, but maybe it's an already looted dungeon, stuff like that. And then the final one was one I just was reminded of the other day. When I came home from work, they were playing Dust in the Wind on the radio. And long ago, when I first heard the song Dust in the Wind, I had this image of these two guys convincing people that life is not worth living. All we are is dust in the wind. And then for some reason, the image in my mind was they were turning these people to stone for some reason. Kind of like a Medusa or something. It's like, oh, it's not worth living, so we will turn you to stone and then you'll last forever or something like that. So I can talk about that a little bit more. And that, of course, doesn't. Any topics I might have mentioned in my old videos, those are completely up for grabs. I didn't make a list of those. I know someone's still waiting for what I'm going to do with those statues. I'll definitely, when I figure that out, put that up. And there's that one treeless wood thing. I remember in like the Gulthius tree video I had mentioned something to follow up on. If anybody remembers what that is offhand, please just let me know. I will follow up on stuff I say in old videos, but almost exclusively only if you bother me about it. Because with school and work now, there's just so much on my plate that I can't remember what I had said before. I wish I was doing these videos day by day, but I'm not able to. So feel free to vote. If there's anything else related to D&D that you might have a question about, I know some of the people who watch my videos, you are running D&D games. If you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and leave a comment or send me a PM. I do check my PMs, so I get those. Other than that, though, I'm just going to say bye-bye.